Good afternoon. I will call the House Higher Education Finance and Policy Committee to order. We do not have quorum just yet, so we're not going to approve the minutes, but we will move forward to the University of Minnesota's presentation. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and start your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Julie Tonneson. I'm the Budget Director for the University of Minnesota, and we thank you for inviting us for a third day to discuss the university's current and proposed appropriations. We really appreciate this opportunity and this time that you're dedicating to better understand these important aspects of the university's activities. Today's agenda is very full, so my brief task is simply to provide a quick introductory overview of how things will flow. Then, with your permission, I'll turn the chair and the presentation over to my colleagues to walk through 3 different functional areas. And as we've experienced in our 2 prior meetings, we are happy to pause for questions at those functional transitions or whenever it's most helpful to the committee. The riders to our O&M appropriation that we will touch on today include those highlighted here. The faded lines were explained in our first 2 meetings. The Cancer Center MnDrive Initiative, row 199 on your spreadsheet, will be described in the second functional area today under the research-related items. And I'll just note that due to a particular interest in these activities, we will also mention other MnDrive initiatives, at least one, that are not included on your spreadsheet because they were incorporated into the O&M base prior to the current biennium. But we will touch on those briefly. And we will begin today's conversation with the safety and security riders, the other 2 highlighted rows here, just as soon as I leave the table. The non-recurring and recurring lines identified separately on this slide are combined on row 202 of your spreadsheet. Moving to the state specials, the items in gray will be covered today. The first row, our largest state special appropriation, is on line 223 of your spreadsheet and will be addressed in full as part of the last agenda item today. Starting with the Bell Museum and moving down this table in the gray column, those are each part of the system special, which is row 226 of your spreadsheet. You can see that we described the remaining items in the system special last week, those in the February 20 column. The Bell Museum will be part of the last agenda item today with the agricultural related appropriations, while the remaining lines in gray down through the $6.2 million for the Natural Resources Research Institute will be addressed during the research related appropriation, which is item 2 on the agenda. And that agenda with the 3 functional areas I referenced looks like this. First, the safety and security items, second, the research-related items, and then third, the agricultural-related items. As we did at our earlier meeting, we will insert a description of a portion of our biennial budget request, this time the portion related to driving economic growth through research during item 2. We organized it this way, as you see on the agenda, based on the focus of the individual appropriations and the belief that the descriptions will flow better and be easier to understand as components of these larger categories. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Eric Swanson, to walk you through the system-wide safety and security rider.
Thank you. We do have quorum now, and so we are going to move the approval of the minutes from February 25th. I'll entertain a motion to move those minutes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Representative Robbins moves the approval of the minutes from February 25th. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye. Opposed, say nay. Minutes are approved. Yes, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure I have the spreadsheet that the testifier keeps referring to. I'm not sure I know which one that is.
So it is the large spreadsheet that is the Chapter 41. It should still be in your folder. It looks like this. So this is from the last Chapter 41 end of session last biennium. And the University of Minnesota, and thank you for asking that, by the way, Representative Liebling. We should have done that before we started. So we're going to be primarily on page 6 of the spreadsheet, 6 of 8. And on page 7. So that is a section that covers the University of Minnesota, their riders, their state special appropriations. And this is the information that they've been presenting. Not always as clear as we would have liked, Representative Liebling, but this is where we are. And so today we'll be focusing primarily on the safety, which would be, so it's system-wide safety security, which is line 202 on page 6 of the spreadsheet. You-
Thank
okay.
you.
Yes, you're
Appreciate
very welcome. And so the previous presentations dealt primarily with line 197, which was medical school development. Today, they're also going to be talking about the 199, which is Min Drive, and they'll be referencing that as we go along. But this just kind of helps us to know what this $193 million outside of O&M is spent on. And so it's taken us 3 days to get through 193 million. And as you pointed out, it can be confusing. So that's where we are on the spreadsheet today, and thank you for asking, Representative Liebling.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, without any further questions, we will move forward with the presentation. Welcome to the committee, and please state your name for the record.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Rarick and committee members. My name is Eric Swanson. I am the interim chief of the University of Minnesota Police Department, which is also the leadership of the Department of Public Safety at the University of Minnesota. And I want to thank you for having me here today to speak about many of the safety improvements that we've made on campus and share some very positive results over the last year. And then I would also like to talk about some future plans that we have. First, I would like to review the expenditures related to the state appropriations made in 2023. If you would reference lines 211 and 212 of Chapter 14 on the spreadsheet in your materials. Okay. While some of the investments that we made are not as visible as, say, our off-campus safety center, many of these things are structural and security improvements that we've made to the campus, okay? And they ensure the safety of our students, staff, and faculty. The state has afforded us the opportunity to take a proactive approach to security, and it's allowed us to address some forward-thinking technical improvements. And I would like to jump to this next slide to get a little more detail in this. So the state provided us with $1 million of ongoing funding, and that money is spent for a few different things. We are staffing security and police on our 5 campuses, okay? We are also funding security improvements in the terms of we have a number of products, things like card readers, cameras, alarms, things that reach an end-of-life phase. And technology moves pretty quickly today. If you don't have a method of replacing those things in a timely manner, you're going to start to have some issues very quickly. So some of this is being kept as an end-of-life fund. When we have products that reach a certain stage, we've got the funds, the ability to upgrade them and do something with them. An example of that is we have cameras, or we did, that were analog. And what that really means is we've got cameras that they're very old school, right? They aren't smart. If you look at them, you can see what's there, but it's certainly not going to tell you much more than that. We've moved all to digital cameras, and one of the reasons why is we can layer analytics on those cameras that are going to call those cameras up. So we have a very large monitoring center that watches these cameras, and that monitoring center has a lot to do. We have thousands of cameras. There's no way for humans to actually do that. So by moving to higher grade technology, we can layer analytics, and those cameras can tell us there's something to be watched. So it improves our ability to watch cameras, for lack of a better term. And when those analog cameras get old, or when technology gets old, it costs money. So some of this is being used to fund as a maintenance those end-of-life products as they come along. We've also funded a security-wide infrastructure manager, someone who can keep their eyes on security infrastructure over time and know when it's reaching end of life or what improvements that we need to make as we go along, okay? And that constitutes where we've been with that ongoing funding for $1 million. I'd like to jump to our one-time allotments. We received $4 million in FY24 and $4 million in FY25, okay? And what we did in that space is that we elevated a lot of equipment that we had that was getting old. So I mentioned the $1 million is being used as an ongoing maintenance fund. These were absolute need-to-do projects that we had to get to right away. An example is we had a card reader system on the Duluth campus, I think was from the 90s. And obviously you can see where that would go. In the modern era, we're starting to get away from cards. Someday we're going to move towards the point where your mobile phone is actually your credential to get in and out of a building. As we move forward in that direction, we're going to need the technology to support it, so hence we had to replace that system. We added 1,100 new cameras with that money to the campuses. We had 700 analog cameras, like I mentioned earlier, that were absolutely end of life, and those had to be moved on as well. So we were able to make some significant improvements to our campuses based on that. We're also able to do some physical deterrent stuff. So we have something called a code blue phone, and if no one knows what that is, it's a phone that is colored blue, and it has the words 911 on it, and it's mounted in various places around our campus, and in some cases off campus. And the idea is that if you didn't have a phone, or you lost your phone, or your phone was taken, you could get to a code blue phone, press the button, and it links directly with 911, okay? We're able to put those in spaces where maybe you don't have good existing infrastructure to mount a camera. So green spaces, for example, where you've got a lot of wide open space, you can put one of these code blue phones on there. A secondary benefit, those are also cameras, okay? So we have cameras mounted on them as well. So you've got a problem, student, staff, whoever, you go to that code blue phone, you punch that button, you're linked with 911, and the dispatcher can see you and everything around you, okay? Additionally, there's a light that flashes on top to give first responders a little better signal. So we installed a number of those system-wide, okay, not just on Twin Cities. That extends our security infrastructure even farther and sometimes puts it in places that are dark, like I mentioned, green spaces that there isn't a lot of opportunity to do anything with. We're also using that money to create a strategic operations center. We're integrating a lot of our technology into the Twin Cities campus, and why? We have a full-time monitoring center 24 hours a day. It's a combination 911 center, combination camera center, and combination card access center. All the critical functions that you need to do from a technology standpoint to keep the campus safe are there. So why is that valuable? If there were an incident in Morris, an incident in Duluth, we get the notification, we can remotely lock a facility or a set of rooms within a facility. Our dispatchers can go to those cameras, they can see what's going on real time. If they need first responders to come in, they can feed that data to first responders on what they're seeing before they even get there. So we can take an area, we can isolate electronically, at least the best we can. We can go on camera, we can get information. So we're taking a lot of these technologies and we're feeding it into that strategic operations center so that we're going to be able to not just run Twin Cities, but we're going to be able to run a number of other campuses as well. And we're doing some stuff that's not on campus. So we've got spaces in Grand Rapids, we've got spaces out in Wilmer. We have a poultry barn in Wilmer. We can lock the poultry barn in Wilmer if we so chose. I don't know why we would do that, but we've got the ability to do it. So the Strategic Operations Center is pulling all those security amenities I've talked about, and we're gluing them to one space. And that's going to allow us to be way ahead of the game. In an active threat scenario, in any other sort of event, we're in good shape. And we've used the money, and I want to just go on record and say thanks to the state for doing it, because I can see the benefits for our student, staff, and faculty in those improvements. Okay. Moving forward, I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're doing off campus, by the way. So last year, we started a pilot project, and I don't know if people know this. We agreed to patrol a section of the city of Minneapolis, okay? We've got a good ongoing relationship with MPD, but one of the challenges is they're not always as well-staffed as they should be. Their response times are encumbered slightly by that. We determined there was a section of the community that we could patrol. It was largely students that lived there, there were fraternities there, so it really matched kind of our ecosystem already. So we agreed to take over that area from a 911 response and from an investigative response. So we respond to the calls in that area, we handle the investigations that come out of that area. The goal was to take some of the pressure off the city, right, and provide some improvements there. And so that area, just for people know, it's 35W to Oak Street. Oak Street's basically Huntington Bank Stadium, for those who've been there. It's University to 4th Street, okay? And by us taking over that area and then taking over some of the calls, we've been able to get to some of these things faster, and we've seen some very positive results. I had my crime analyst do some numbers for me. We've seen decreases in crime in that area. We're very visible in those spaces. Our response times are excellent. And because of that, we've decided that we're going to continue this pilot for another year. okay? So later today, we'll be announcing that and stating that we're going to actually continue on with the pilot project. So that's one of the interesting things we're doing off campus. When I started in this profession 30 years ago, there wasn't really a thought of the university coming into the city and doing that type of work, but in today's times, that's what we're doing. And I want to say this, it's really been a good partnership with MPD. I think they've been happy to have us, and I think it's increased our ability to sort of cross-train and work with them. One other thing I'd like to mention is we've developed our off-campus safety center. I referenced that earlier in my notes. What is the Off-Campus Safety Center? It's a lot of things at once. So we leased a property in Dinkytown. It's on 4th Street. If anyone gets a chance, stop by, talk to my government relations people, book some time to go there. There's a lot of things happening there. It is a place for students to come and study. So it's on our card access system. Students can come in, study. It's a safe space. We have staff there the whole time that we're open. And it's a pretty nice space, too. If you get a chance to go there, it's pretty chill. So they go in there, they spend their time there, they feel safe. They don't have to worry about anyone maybe grabbing their book bag. We also do self-defense workshops out of there. So we just did one Tuesday night. So we had a sorority group that wanted self-defense training. We do that regularly. We set that up. My community engagement team runs it, but we bring officers in to help do the training. So we had a sorority in doing self-defense training at our safety center. And they're interacting with officers and learning self-defense techniques. We also bring in community groups so that they can go there and they can have the opportunity to, say, hold an event, and it's in a space that's very close to campus, and it's very close to Dinkytown. A lot of opportunities in that regard. We have also added security patrols to Dinkytown. So we as the police are doing it, but we also have a security officer division, okay? And those individuals are also in Dinkytown. They're out walking around at night, and they also base out of that safety center. So if someone needs help, they can go to the safety center, and there's a uniformed person there that's able to either take a report or get them further help. And we've been very pleased with that process as well. The university has really put a foot forward off campus to try to make things safer for us in that, at least in the community's regard. And it's been a good move. So in closing, want to thank you for having me here today and for your interest in these important issues. With the support of President Cunningham and with the support of Executive Vice President Greg Goldman, we look forward to continuing our commitments to student, staff, and faculty in the surrounding community, and I stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Chief Swanson. We actually have the Public Safety Chair here. I think he wants to ask a question. So,
Go ahead.
I do.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. Interim Chief Swanson, well, my last point that I was going to make is one that you touched on, and thank you. I want to first address that. We'll bring out the good things first. I think your expanding of the patrol area has made great difference in the feel of the campus, and we've seen the reduction in the serious crimes. And thank you for that. That was going to be my question, if there is a plan to make it permanent. So thank you for addressing that. And looks like you have some. Go ahead.
Yeah, Chief Swanson.
Permission to respond, Chair Rarick.
Chief Swanson, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think this is a wait and see. I think we're going to set from our year. We're going to go to March of next year and ask ourselves what's changed. Obviously, when the conversation with the city is an important aspect of that, asking, how do they feel about it? But things are going well enough right now. It's don't upset the apple cart, right? Let's keep this going. And I think it's look at it in March of 26 and ask ourselves where we're at. So,
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. Interim Chief Swanson. And yeah, I thought in my time going to different events at the university, the main campus, just that checkerboard, what's city, what's university, really gave a chance for the bad actors to manipulate that. So I think the overall blanket patrol covering everything eliminates so much of that. So thank you for doing that, and I hope that you do look at make that permanent. You talked about the cameras, and you were talking about using the analog cameras. They're great, as you said, to look at, but when you go back forensically, there's nothing there. It's fuzzy. And you talked about the fact that you can get some better suspect descriptions coming up. And this was not anything to do with current administrations, but in past administrations, there was a restriction on description of suspects and a way of putting out crime alerts that were almost useless because something happened and somebody did something. And has there been changes to that program?
Chief Swanson.
Yeah, thank you. No, there haven't been any changes to that program. That's been a practice that's been in place, I'd say, about 2015. I'd say that was President Kaler's initiative to handle them that way. One point of clarification, though, is I would argue a couple of points on those crime alerts, and that is vehicles are key. If I've got a vehicle and a plate, that's number one. If I've got excellent clothing descriptions, that's probably number two, and it drops off a little bit after that. So what I mean by that is that asking students, especially when we're talking Dinkytown and there's hundreds of people walking around, to grab a physical description off of this warning and then correlate that to someone, it's really tough. So I would say there is some elements there that the more distinctive elements do probably tend to be a vehicle and do probably tend to be unique pieces of clothing. And after that, it does get a little fuzzy. So I'm being cautious here and not completely defending that choice, but I'm also saying there's some question in my mind of how much of the physical description of the suspect actually leads to the capture.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. Interim Chief Swanson, it's just knowing the advances that have been made in the cameras, I would hope that if the camera is able to, get a pretty good picture of the suspect as you were describing, that would be able to, that's not subjective if it's on camera. Next thing I'd like to move on to recruitment and retention. How are we doing there? I know that post-COVID numbers were pretty far down. I was surprised by that. University of Minnesota Police Department's always, in the law enforcement community, been revealed as, one of the top departments, best pay, best working conditions, plenty of opportunity for overtime and things like that. So how are we doing on recruitment and retention? And is there anything that we can help with on that?
Chief Swanson.
Thank you. The answer is great. We're doing a good job of recruiting, and we're doing an excellent job of retention. The university's done a nice job with giving some retention benefits to people. We have a team out there that is doing recruiting, and they're doing an excellent job. We're knocking it out of the park on hiring. We're doing great. And I think one of the reasons we're doing so well is the fact we've got the department we do. We do have the opportunities we do. I mean, you talked about overtime. That's a selling point in and of itself, right? So we're doing great, actually. And I think it's also one of the reasons maybe we moved into that expansion zone. We were solvent on personnel. But in terms of recruiting, hiring, and retention, things are going quite well, actually. Not true of everybody else in this profession, but for us, we're doing good.
Representative Novotny.
No, thank you. I'll pass.
Okay, we'll go to Representative Noor and then Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chief. I think the investment for the 10 million has been significant, and I also wanted to thank Madam Chair for the support during the conversation to get the resources to the U of M. My question is, the safety center right now is in the East Bank area. Is there a plan to extend to the West Bank, or is there any process to also extend the coverage area to some parts of the West Bank?
Yeah.
Chief Swanson.
Sorry. No intent on expanding it currently to the West Bank. Like I said, I think this is a wait and see on the East Bank, and we'll measure that in, like I said, March of '26.
Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you talked about lockdowns, that you can have access to do some of the lockdowns. What about some of the lecture halls that don't have any locks? Is there any plan to upgrade some of those halls?
Very much
Swanson.
under discussion. We're having those conversations now. To your point, you have buildings that were built in the in some cases, the 19th century, but you have buildings that were built in the 20th century. They were built on a different model. So we're in the process right now of talking about how do you retrofit and go back to all these old interior doors, and how do you make that work? So it's a process, but that's under discussion.
Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, there hasn't been any coordination with some of the neighborhoods within surrounding the University of Minnesota. That has been lacking for a long time. Are there any plans from your perspective, finding collaboration with neighborhood groups and individuals who are interested to make sure that there's a complete safety surrounding the U?
Chief Swanson.
So we are in discussions with the Dinkytown District Group. They're in contact with our government relations people. We are always having discussions of how we're going to improve things. I was talking with a colleague today about that very thing. And we're looking at ways that we can partner. Good example is there are sometimes funds that are available through the city or that special district. And we are talking about ways to collaborate to build that. So there is collaboration going back and forth.
Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any possibility that the additional $1 million can also be spent in terms of long-term relationship with the neighborhood organizations and individuals who are interested in safety around the U?
So
Chief Swanson.
So the university has already done some of that investment. So we've got a group called Somali Youth Link, and those folks, we have a contract with them. They are working in Dinkytown for us. They're out patrolling. We have a Somali cultural liaison that works for us. And so we're trying to do outreach into different groups, as you can see. So we've already got some of that going. The university is already funding a fair amount of that.
Representative Noor, last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What about the Como neighborhood, Mercy Homes, and we have got now part of that combination of linking the neighborhoods surrounding that area?
Yeah.
Chief Swanson.
So the Como neighborhood, which sits farther north of Dinkytown, we still will respond to calls in that area, and we'll still patrol in that area. We haven't been in any serious discussions with Minneapolis police about what that would look like.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to talk about your crime rates here. It looks like I have some statistics here showing your crime rates are going up. Is that still the continuation? Are your crime rates going up?
Chief Swanson.
Sorry, going down, going up, I missed the last part. So, good question. So in the expansion zone we're looking at, Dinkytown in general, crime is going down. We've had some very positive results. So we did a study of our expansion zone the last year, and we're seeing thefts are down by about 41%. We're seeing auto thefts are down by about 43%. So at least in regards to that, crime is not going up. We're actually seeing a very good result.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What about violent crimes? Are they going up or down?
No, violent crimes are, I apologize, Madam Chair, a little quick on the draw here, folks. No, violent crime is going down as well. One thing I would point out about, and I think we're still talking about off-campus here, and I would make a distinction. On-campus is pretty safe, by the way. I think we're still talking about off-campus, but off-campus, I would say in the last couple of years, especially the last years, things have gotten much better in Dinkytown. I do some patrolling out there myself at night, and we have a regular crew of people that do that. And we can see the difference. I mean, things are getting better. It's far more livable out there. We hope to continue that trend, but violent crime is going down too.
Representative Duran. Okay. All right, we are going to move on unless there's any other final questions. Okay. Thank you, Chief Swanson.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and continue with your slide presentation.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Shashank Priya. I'm the Vice President of Research and Innovation at the University of Minnesota. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you today to discuss some key parts of the state support for the university's research enterprise. In this slide, you can see the flow of our part of the presentation. We'll start with an overview of the university's research side, and then proceed quickly to some of the amazing impacts that the state support is having. And if we have time, I will share the research portion of the university's biennial request. So this slide is my bragging points about the University of Minnesota. As you can see on this slide, that we are top 10 public research university in the US with the $1.32 billion research portfolio in FY23. That's for the Twin Cities. And our system-wide research expenditure was $1.35 billion. With that amount, we rank 12th among our public peers. Our research mission is very unique. We cover a very wide range of disciplines. We graduate from these disciplines roughly 15,000 students, which many of them become part of our economy and drive this Fortune 500 economy and the industrially driven ecosystem. Many of them stay in Twin Cities and in Minnesota for a very long period of time, adding to the brain gain. We help drive quality of life here in Minnesota, in health, such as in clinical research, and President Cunningham's Healthy Minnesota initiative in key industries such as agriculture, transportation, new crops, new products, state's ag economy. Also, I'm very proud of this fact that we are the largest startup creator in state of the Minnesota. And for the past 4 years, we have been part of 4 universities in the country, public or private, who have spin off more than 20 companies per year. Today, we count more than 275 startups from the university since 2006. And members of the committee, you've probably heard about our recent success with Niron Magnetics, which makes rare earth magnets, basically alternative to the critical material-based magnets, and they're building a major manufacturing plant in Sartell. There are many such really great examples, such as Jard Biosciences or Mitomatrix, et cetera, that make some really key products that drive the economy in our state. So in moving on to our next slide, I think you will see how the state support is being used to drive the research projects that leads to some really great outcomes, which improves the quality of life of Minnesotans and increasingly gets aligned with the Minnesota's economy. One way I can describe this is we get a lot of funding from federal government, state governments, like a large funnel, and this money is used as an input in order to create these outputs. And outputs are licenses and royalties that we get on our patents and the startup companies that we spin out that create the jobs. So each year we are able to compete and bring the dollars in order to finally provide these outcomes for the state citizens. So let's move on to our first item, which is a rider on our general appropriation, operations and maintenance appropriations. It's for cancer care research, specifically our cancer clinical trials network that was passed as an additional MinDrive area in 2018. Note that our other MinDrive research areas of robotics, brain conditions, global food, and environment are no longer separate budget items. They are part of the university's general operations and maintenance appropriations. We have asked Nikos from our robotics team to discuss these areas as a group, as a representative for these other 3 areas, and we'll see in his presentation some great achievements there. But first, I would like to introduce Doug E., who is the medical director of Minnesota Cancer Clinical Trials Network at the U, and he will mention Masonic Cancer Center, which is one of the 2 National Cancer Institute's comprehensive centers in Minnesota, other being at the Mayo Clinic. And he's going to tell us about the Minnesota Cancer Clinical Trial Networks, which is unique in the nation and has only been possible because of the generous support from the state. So Doug, if you come in here.
And members, this is on page 6 of the spreadsheet, and it's line number 199, and it's called MinDrive. So that's the portion of the spreadsheet that we're looking at right now. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and continue with your slide presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Doug Yee. I'm the medical director of the Minnesota Cancer Clinical Trials Network. I'm a physician. I'm a medical oncologist. I take care of breast cancer patients. and I'm the past director of the Masonic Cancer Center, a position I held for 17 years. I stepped down in December, so I certainly was on board for the creation of this network, and I first off want to offer my thanks to the legislature for seeding this, because I think we have really created a very unique opportunity. So I want to give you a little background to this slide. As a Minnesotan, I actually think we should all be proud of the fact that we have 2 National Cancer Institute designated comprehensive cancer centers. For a state of our size, there's us, Masonic Cancer Center, University of Minnesota, and the Mayo Clinic. I think that's a unique accomplishment and really demonstrates the commitment to healthcare our state has. Just by way of example, before I came here, I was in Texas, and there was only 1 cancer center at the time, so it's an achievement that I think we should all be proud of. Beyond that, the National Cancer Institute recognizes community oncology research programs, NCORPs for short. And again, we're fortunate in our state to have 3 NCORPs that serve our state. One is based in the Twin Cities, the other based in Duluth, Essentia, and the third that serves our state is based in at Sanford within Sioux Falls, and they serve the western half of our state. So that's the way of background for this particular slide. When MNCCTN was created, we engaged all of our healthcare partners and now have 24 clinical sites and 156 personnel, offering people in Minnesota the opportunity to participate and be partners in research, which I think is incredibly important for moving the field forward. I want to comment on each of those stars. I know they're probably pretty small, but they're numbers within them, and those are the numbers of Minnesotans that have been engaged in research since the network was created. I also want to emphasize that none of these sites had clinical research available to them until the creation of the network. So even though I said, well, sure, we engaged Essentia and Sanford, these sites were outside of their capabilities at the time, and we used the support from MnDrive to create this particular system. With that, in fiscal year 2024, we provided access to 85 unique cancer clinical trials, and we run the gamut of things that are impactful to cancer, from prevention to screening, treatment, care delivery, and symptom management. Another important mission of the network is to increase awareness of cancer, as well as to increase the awareness of why clinical research is important, and we've reached out to over 1,400 Minnesotans. We also use this opportunity to award research grants to our partners, and partners use the network to fund additional research. So the $314,000 in grants came from our partners, and we have roughly $500 million, and I think it may be even a little bit more than that, in external grants that come because our partners work with us in the network. So I want to give you one example of a pilot project to demonstrate the impact of the network, and this has to do with colorectal cancer screening in Native Americans. So Native Americans have the highest rate of colorectal cancer burden in the country, as well at the same time the lowest rates of screening in the country as well. So we partnered with the Native American Community Clinic to perform a randomized trial to improve these screening rates. I should have mentioned, initially, when the network was created, our goal was to reach out to Greater Minnesota to offer people that live in Greater Minnesota the opportunity to participate in research. Over time, we recognized the fact that there are many underrepresented groups within the cities that also need better access to research opportunities, and this is an example of that particular mission. So in this particular trial, several hundred subjects were assigned to receive what's called the usual care versus outreach. This particular outreach intervention provided a kit for blood testing in the stool, as well as reminder phone calls that were tailored to be culturally appropriate. The goal was to see if people would complete screening within 6 months. So that's what the numbers represent. 3% of the usual care group completed screening, and I had a typo on this slide, but it's closer to 20% of the outreach group completed screening. In other words, a 16.8% increase. Now, you could look at that and say, well, that's a step in the right direction. It's not where we exactly want to be, and I would agree with that completely. There are multiple other factors that we need to consider when reaching out to patients about cancer screening and prevention. It includes education, advertising, if you will, understanding what the value of the screening is, community consensus, which for the Native American Community Clinic, Native American population is extraordinarily important, as well as logistics for screening. Some patients just don't have the transportation or the resources to participate in the full screening initiative. So with that example, I'd like to summarize, and again, thank you from all of the members that take care of cancer patients within our state for the ability to create this network. I believe we are unique in the country. As I mentioned, I have been a cancer center director for 17 years. I have a pretty good idea of what goes on in other states, and I don't think any other state has a mechanism like the Trials Network. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to take questions now or later.
Thank you, Dr. Yee. So I do have a question. So the appropriation from the state through the rider for MnDrive specifically was $4 million a year. What is the total appropriation or like the total revenue that you use to do MnDrive per year? So we gave you $4 million of what? What's the total for MnDrive?
Is the question, are there additional funds we use for the network? Or is the question, how much do we use per calendar or fiscal year?
Thank you, Dr. Yee. So MnDrive is the name of one of the
Yes.
riders that we give money to. It's $4 million a year. And what you described, I'm assuming, is more than $4 million a year. So I'm wondering if that's what you just described is the total use of the $4 million, or is there other money that comes into MnDrive?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, and I don't want to overcomplicate things, but for example, when our colleagues have an idea they want to run through the network, some of the research is supported by their existing grants or from their home institutions. So we've opened clinical trials that involve the Mayo Clinic, for us, open trials that were forwarded by Essentia. So we really support with the $4 million the research staffing to do that sufficiently, safely, and to be able to report the results. So I think all the $4 million appropriation is used within the network. And one of the points that I'd like to make is a lot of it doesn't actually stay at the university. Most of it goes out to our colleagues in these other centers. But there is some partnership with existing funding to get some of the research done based on their own grants, for example.
Thank you, Dr. Yee. So the other money that you use to fund this whole project, so the network and I'm not sure if the network is MnDrive or,
Yeah.
Is that the same thing? So the
Yeah.
network that you're describing is the MnDrive appropriation
yeah.
from the state. And so if there is other money that supplement all of this, how much is that total? And we're just trying to figure out what, of our
yeah.
$4 million, is there more than that? Or are you describing the total use of the $4 million?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if we have an exact number. Ms. Ronnie is here, who's the administrative lead, if we can actually put that number to a piece of paper. But I will tell you, I'll give you an example. So one of our colleagues who works with the Native American community has a tobacco control program. She has that federally funded through the National Cancer Institute. She wanted to expand her program, so we supported them at an additional level. So if you ask the question, well, how much was her grant per year? It was about $1 million. We provided a relatively small amount, maybe $50,000, $60,000, to be able to expand her network. So all of the research that is being done in that particular project is not completely funded by the network.
Okay, Dr. Yee. So we have a couple other questions. Yeah. So let me just pull back just a little bit, because the purpose of the 3 days of hearings is so that we could understand. So 193 million and some change was granted in the last biennium for state specials and riders. And one of those riders is MnDrive. So
Yes.
in MnDrive, the state of Minnesota gave the University of Minnesota $8 million.
Yes.
And so the question is, what did you do with the $8 million? And so as you're describing the network and all these other things that were built, that's the question is, so is that the total use of the $8 million, or, have you pulled in other money? So out of all of the line items, that's kind of what we want to know. So
Okay.
we gave, $30 million to the medical school development, and, so those are the questions we're trying to answer. But I'm going to go to another member. Representative Duran has a question, and then Representative Cleaborn, and I bet Representative Liebling, too? I think she does. So I think we started a whole bunch of questions here, because we're just trying to understand,
I understand. yeah.
as the Higher Ed Committee in the state of Minnesota provided $193 million for money outside of O&M to the University of Minnesota, and we're trying to understand, well, how was that used?
Okay.
And as opposed to the $5 million or $5 billion per year budget of the University of Minnesota and the $1.3 billion of research money of that, that's fine, but we want to know specifically the money that the state of Minnesota gave the University of Minnesota, how that was used. And so I'm going to go to Representative Duran.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to talk about the Native American portion of this. I have a Native American reservation inside my district and then surrounded by two. Is there any outreach to northern Minnesota for the Native Americans, or is it just down in this area?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't include the entirety of our existence, but our very first interaction with the Native American community was with the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. They reached out to us in the university as to whether we could help them with a tobacco control program. That program ran for several years, and I think it was one of the very first things we actually funded with the network. So I want to get back to the question about what actually is, where the money is going. As mentioned, none of these sites that are starred on your map have any employed research personnel. So the reason they can't offer their patients the opportunity to participate in clinical trials is because they just don't have the staff to do this efficiently and safely. So our partnership with all of our clinical partners is to help provide them with research staffing. So that is where the bulk of money goes, is to personnel to do the research. And I maybe didn't make it clear. Sometimes research procedures are done by the parent institution that supports that work. But again, we wouldn't be able to accrue people from just Thief River Falls if it wasn't for the fact that the networks exist and we have people there. Similarly, with the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe example, we built a pretty good infrastructure with tribal approval in that network. And I mentioned the other newly funded work too. That's also reaching out to other tribal communities throughout the state, and also some of it with new relationships that didn't exist before.
Representative Duran?
Has there been any outreach to Red Lake, White Earth, or Leech Lake at all? Do you know?
Yeah, I would love to have that opportunity. That's an active discussion. And I think so. We are using our conduits in the American Indian Cancer Foundation, which is based in the cities, as well as the Native American Community Clinic, to make that outreach to tribal leadership, because I do think there are a number of opportunities where could be good community partnership. I think, the point number one when we do this type of research is to understand what the community really wants from us. We are not in the position to say, well, here's a study we want you to participate because it would be great for us. We're very much in this position of we want to understand what the needs are in your community and design opportunities for you to address that need. And that's where we will hope to build in the future as we expand on our efforts within the Twin Cities. And I think we've been having our discussion with our colleagues in Duluth about Essentia outreach as well. So I think that's a top priority for the network.
Representative Duran?
Thank you for that. And if you need a connection, I'm here for you.
Okay,
So,
I would love to do
thank you
that.
very much.
Representative Cleaborn? And then after that, Representative Liebling.
Thank you very much. I think it was yesterday when I was driving in, I heard on NPR a woman talking about a clinical trial that she was a breast cancer patient, that she could participate in her small community at her 25-bed hospital.
Yes.
And I think as we try to get our heads around this idea of, quote, network, right? She was concerned about losing the funding for that satellite network facility, and her ability, if she had to drive all the way into Iowa City, she wouldn't, it takes her a full day. She's exhausted getting there, exhausted coming back after receiving her treatment. But in the satellite facility closer to her home, she could go 3 hours, get her infusion, and then go home and have a better quality of life. So as we're thinking about these networks that you're talking about, so I'm hearing you say that, at least I think I'm hearing you say, so the primary research for this project might be at Duluth or it might be at the Twin Cities campus. But these individuals all across greater Minnesota, because of this network system, might be able to participate. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Dr. Yee.
Yes, thank you very much. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And
Okay.
the one, it's hard to say this is a silver lining, but the one thing COVID taught us is that there are many things we can do that are decentralized or remotely managed. So what you described is exactly what we want to do. If patients who live in greater Minnesota are disincentivized from participating in trials because they have to drive 3 hours, we need to fix that. So we can potentially do the trial, or if it's a drug infusion closer to home, we can do the monitoring and data collection potentially remotely. We can even talk to the patient remotely about side effects or concerns that they have. And I think that that's a build out for the network that, again, we learned during COVID. You know, prior to COVID, quite honestly, as a physician, never did that. I never had a remote call with a patient who lived in, you know, Worthington or outside in greater Minnesota. And now I'd say in my average clinic day, that's maybe a third of the visits are people who I'm taking care of or partly taking care of and talking to remotely through video conferencing. And we can do the exact same things with research trials. And that's one of the things we want to build out.
Representative Cleburne.
Thank you. So this $4 million that you received from the university, or from the state for this MinDrive program, I just want to make sure one more time that I am understanding it. That $4 million allows the network to have the staffing, not necessarily the research scientist, but to have the staffing there to make sure that all of the protocols and safety measures for that patient are in place in that local facility. And these, you know, whether you're talking about colorectal screening, which is really important, but also in these other studies where this might be the individual's only opportunity to get access to this life-saving study and research project. Is that correct?
Dr. Yee.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so in my life as an oncologist, I believe we make advances by partnering with patients in participation in clinical research. I always tell patients that today's ceiling is tomorrow's floor. We have to be better than where we are. And, you know, if we don't have that opportunity because we put too many barriers in front of patients, that's what we need to overcome. So the funding goes exactly towards that, trying to overcome the barrier of distance as well as the appropriate expertise at each of these sites to open studies.
And then one last statement.
Yes, of course, Representative Cleburne.
And then this is just a statement. I just want to say thank you for looking beyond the local borders and to make sure that people from all over our state, I mean, as I looked at the map, I see that this is really important for greater Minnesota to be able to participate. And having had family members who've lived in remote locations where nothing would have been available to them in other states, this is really an awesome program that you're doing. So I just want to thank you for reaching out and caring for all Minnesotans. Thank you.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And these questions have been really helpful to me, too, because I've been sort of trying to wrap my head around what this is. And I know the chair is, too. We all are. And, of course, this did not go to the Health Committee either. So,
Representative
there you
Liebling,
go.
I appreciate that, and I actually started that ball rolling.
Yeah,
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 thank you.
thank you for
Representative
that. So as I think I understand it a lot better now. And how I would maybe describe what it is it's not a research project, it's an infrastructure that allows for research clinical trials to be done with patients in many more locations. And I see from the slide here that, you know, you have a lot of partners for that. And so you're just creating an infrastructure that I know in clinical trials it can be difficult to recruit patients when you especially depending on what you're studying, you need patients with certain characteristics. And so I imagine that this helps researchers also to have a potentially access to more people to be in a study, which of course improves the studies as well. So I can see that, you know, not only it allows for some patients who otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to be in a study that, you know, and we know this isn't care as such. This isn't a care network. That's the thing. And it's not, you know, promoting a particular study. It's just creating the conditions whereby there can be some synergy about getting more clinical trials. And I see heads shaking, and so I, you know, having started out from this conversation kind of just really confused about what we're talking about here, I can see that this is a really good thing and probably pretty unique, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Liebling. Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. And thank you for your input the last hearing, because that really did kind of push the conversation in a way. So it's like, okay, we really need to understand, here's the money that was appropriated. This is what they're doing with it. Just very streamlined because they do a lot of work, right? So, and they do have a $5 billion annual budget in the total of the University of Minnesota. And of that, 1.3 to 1.4, depending on the year, is for research. But our narrow slice that we're trying to understand here is 193 million. So I appreciate your questions last time. That really helped hone things in. And I checked in with my team, and we checked in with your team. And so we're hoping that this conversation will get tighter and more clear. And I did start the conversation too about the Health Committee taking up some of this to look at it, because God bless you for being on this committee, but I'm not going to put this whole thing on you to understand how it all works. So we need another committee to take a look at it too. So I do appreciate that, Liebling. All right, I will go back to Dr. Yee and
Can I respond to the last comment? I just want to say that's exactly right about what the network is. I always tell patients when they see a physician with a new diagnosis of cancer to ask if there's a clinical trial available for me. I don't want to be the answer to be no, we don't do clinical trials at this site. And that unfortunately happens in many sites that don't have the infrastructure ability to do research.
great. I think we have a question from Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, Vice President Priya. The MinDrive is a collective of other research rather than the MNCCTN. Is that correct? So there are various programs that are under the MinDrive, so that is funding the $4 million per year. Is that correct?
Dr. Priya?
The amounts are different, but yeah, they are a collection of programs such as robotics and brain conditions and global food and environment. So there are different topics. And Julie?
Ms. Tonneson is going to come up and help us understand the totality. So you've been listening to the whole thing, Ms. Tonneson. So maybe you could help us understand our $8 million in total is a part of what?
Right. Madam Chair, Representative Noor, you are correct. Vice President Priya is correct. MinDrive is a umbrella term under which there are a number of initiatives. Most of those have been funded and were incorporated into the O&M base of the university. This particular $8 million for this biennium was in a rider, but it is just one of a larger set of initiatives. This $8 million has been spent only on what Dr. Yee is talking about, the Cancer Center or the Cancer Initiative under MinDrive. But there are others, but they're part of the O&M, so they're not in your 193. And so if they do the next slide that's about robotics, that is not in your spreadsheet as a separate item. It's in O&M. Does that help?
Yes, Ms. Tonneson, that helps tremendously. Representative Noor.
That's exactly what I wanted. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam.
Wonderful. Representative Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the testifiers for being here today. I was just kind of wondering, could you help me understand a little bit more about the licenses, royalties, and patents that have been generated by this program? Particularly, how many are owned in cooperation or jointly with the University of Minnesota, if that is happening?
Dr. Yee?
Yeah, at this point, I don't think we've had many inventions run through this network that result in licenses and royalties. I will comment that we have focused on what we call investigator-initiated research, meaning that somebody brings an idea to the network. In our world, that's mostly drugs or products, and you're asking a really good question. To run investigational new drugs through a larger network like this needs a little bit of work, and that is one of our future directions, how we can do that most efficiently. And that's where the license and royalties will come from, if we can run an investigational new drug through the network.
Representative Allen?
Yes, I appreciate that, and thank you for answering that for me. And that was, let me see here real quick. Yeah, that's all I had for questions for now, so thank you very much for your time.
Okay, let's continue with the slide presentation. I'm sure we'll have lots more questions, so.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Doug. Now I'd like to introduce you my colleague, Nikos Papanikopoulos, a distinguished researcher in our Department of Computer Science and Engineering, who heads the Minnesota Robotics Institute, which was founded in part because of the state support through MnDRIVE. So Nikos.
Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and continue with the slide presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Nikos Papanikopoulos. I'm professor of computer science and director of the Minnesota Robotics Institute. So I would like to say that the support from the state through the MnDRIVE program has been the springboard for creating a robotics ecosystem, which is one of the top in the country. As you can see, according to the CS rankings, we're number 8 in the US and number 10. And these numbers do not mean much. We need to look at the impact. So the impact is actually we're able to leverage the support from the state with the single largest donor to the College of Science and Engineering for $10 million, who gave us a brand new facility, which enabled us to hire 15 faculty members in the broader area. And then this was the springboard for a variety of activities in research. We started a new master's program in robotics, which has 135 students. As graduates, 60 students who are basically impacting the local community, business community, from companies like Toro, small startups like Centera, Histosonics, IDL, and then we go to larger companies like Honeywell. Honeywell, for example, has more than 10 of our graduates. And also it has been the foundation for us to pursue an NSF, NIFA AI Institute, who brought $20 million, and also support a variety of initiatives. For example, we are working with companies like Medtronic in order to have new treatments, robotic treatments for stroke. And the goal is basically, so we support the faculty and Medtronic in order to show the feasibility of a project. Think about, you have a stroke, and then if you are within a radius of 70 miles, your treatment starts from the ambulance. This is a unique partnership. We have partnerships with companies like Power Systems, where we help them. Power Systems is the company that built the robotic cranes for Chernobyl and Fukushima. And we make them introduce AI technologies in order to be more competitive, in order to have manufacturing in the stay in Minnesota. And finally, I would like to say that we have large programs and impacts in precision agriculture. With companies like Centera and Toro, we try to reduce the use of fertilizers based on collecting information using drones and ground robots about the plant health. So just to give you an idea, this may reduce the use of fertilizers by 20%, which just for Minnesota is $800 million. Having said that, there is a significant component, which is outreach. We have 60 events every year, and I would like to extend an invitation for you to come and visit us. Yesterday, we had the students from Hutchinson. We have events in the summer, completely free. Kids come to the facilities. They do different from programming to technical writing, and they see how the university life is. So your support, which has been tremendous, has enabled us to become from a very small activity to something that is really paving new ways, not only in robotics and automation, but in this new thing that is changing our lives, which is AI, that is infused in all these operations.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Okay, seeing none, you can continue with your presentation.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Nikos. There's a lot of exciting things happening in robotics, and we'll welcome any one of you to come down and participate in our event. Now, Madam Chair, members of the committee, let's turn to a unique research resource we have in northeastern Minnesota, the Natural Resources Research Institute, or NRI, with facilities in Duluth and on the Iron Range. I would like to introduce Rolf Weber, who has directed NRI since 2014. Rolf, please join us here.
Thank you. And members, on your spreadsheet on page 7, it is line 230. It was a system special for NRRI, and it was a total of $4 million. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and continue with your slide presentation.
My name is Rolf Weberg. I'm the Executive Director at NRRI. Thank you, Chair Rarick and committee members, for the opportunity to speak with you today, as well as to thank you for the foundational base support that really keeps the Institute running on a daily basis. So I'll start by changing the slide. The Natural Resources Research Institute was created by the legislators with a legislative charter. You'll note that it has an economic development component as well as an environmental stewardship component, which we take quite seriously as we look at to have competitive industries here in the state of Minnesota. We're a mission-driven, impact-focused group that's part of the University of Minnesota Research Enterprise, delivering every day for the state of Minnesota. Our mission really focuses on delivery. We need to be working at the speed of business. Our industrial clients, our agency clients expect a turnaround, and we need to be able to serve that. We focus on integrated research solutions because we really focus on building a team around a problem and building the right team around the problem. Many times that team includes people from the university and people outside the university to really build for a solution versus an answer. Altogether, we're all here today to talk about what is that economy of the future and how do we design that, and that's really the vision we hope to be bringing to the state of Minnesota. Next slide. This is a takeaway, if you will, is what is NRI? Most of you probably haven't been there. You have an open invitation at any time. We have 3 sites across the northern part of the state in Duluth and in Coleraine, as Dr. Priya outlined. We also have one in the middle in Zim, which is a recovered wetland that's now becoming a global site for understanding what a wetland will do for carbon. We have 150 people working between those 3 sites, researchers. We're a system, Applied Research Institute. We engage faculty and students from across the entire system in that work. We have broad industry and regional relationships. Our customer relationship management database has over 400 partners that we work with, whether they're companies or businesses, agencies, national labs. We have a grams to ton capability, and this is important because when you're talking about risk reduction or reduction of risk to investment, that's where you can attract an industry to come in and invest when they can understand what happens to the energy, what happens to the thermal energy when you're building a facility. That I already talked about the integrated science and engineering model. We practice that. That folds in very nicely with a lot of our industrial clients, and we are on the spot where a lot of this is happening. So we're able to work directly with our industry partners, agency partners, national lab partners in the work we do. Getting to the state special specifically, I want to make a comment in the slide 3. There were 2 items in there that were related to NRI. One was the Center for Economic Development. That was eliminated by UMD in 2020 because the SBDC, which was the Center for Economic Development, rolled into something called the Northland Foundation, which is located in Duluth, Minnesota. That money is part of the NRI State Special. We continue to support Northland Foundation and some of the work they do in the region where NRI brings technical expertise to the problems they're trying to solve with business and industry. Splitting the conversation to two in this slide, we have an annual recurring of $4.4 million. This is the money we used for base funding to recruit and retain key personnel from around the world to work with us. We scale the amount we give to each researcher based on how high they are up in the organization and quite fundamentally how much they're bringing in. We have a lot of research infrastructure at the Institute, safety, for example, intellectual property. There's some of the questions that Representative Allen asked about. That is there to make sure that we're having our researchers do the job they do best, which is research. We have a lot of team leadership and new program development. Our programs are always evolving every day as we work with our clients. And the other piece that's really important to call out is when we are able to use some of this money for grant matching, it puts us in a very, very competitive stance nationally when we want to pull federal money back into the state of Minnesota. We also seed research funding at the order of $10 to maybe $20,000 at a time for what are those good ideas that we aren't sure what they are, but it's worth taking a look at. And this seed funding goes across the university system. So we pull people into those conversations. And we also keep some of this money in reserve because when we go down, we don't have the excuse that we can't fix it. If U.S. Steel needs the answer by next week, we have to fix it now. And so we keep reserves and we do use those to be able to respond. So that's basically what we use the base funding for. The second piece, which is a non-recurring piece, which again, thank you, the legislature gave to us in 2023. The facilities we have in Coleraine were built in 1905. The facility in Duluth was built in the 1950s, and they have some code issues. Every time we change a laboratory, we have to invest in it. So you gave us that money to get started on some of these things so that we could continue to grow and continue to stay apace with the level of work that we're being asked to do on a national level. The last slide I would share with you is what I like to call return on investment. These are 5 items I wanted to share with you that occurred in the last year. Number one, NRI, essentially, if you looked at the Keetac mine up in northern Minnesota, we built the process while they were designing it, and 20 miles down the road, they could reduce the risk. It cut time off, cut cost off, and we have a new facility now that means new jobs and relevance of Minnesota iron to 70% of the industry we don't participate in today. We are now engaged with the Mintac mine to do the same thing, the scope of which will be much bigger. We are working with the MPCA to deliver 3 water treatment technologies, 2 for sulfate, 1 for PFAS, to roll it out as demonstrations, not experiments, but as demonstrations that can be incorporated into water treatment facilities around the state. The fun one, the Innova tree, is an invention. This is a tree that grows 10 feet a year, processes 4 times the amount of water as a red pine, and forms biomass and sequesters carbon, which feeds into a lot of our carbon sequestration work, as well as a new source of carbon that we can use for steel making, which is an interesting application. Yes, Representative Allen, we are getting royalties. Engineered biocarbon for tomorrow's steel industry. We have a patent, which is another one for you, Representative Allen. We have a patent right now that we have world-leading technology that all the major steel companies in the world are asking for access to be able to take biocarbon and make it work in an electric arc furnace, which again puts us in competition globally. And finally, the last 2, which are interesting because they were the result of legislative requests of NRI. One of your former colleagues literally threw a pile of paper at me and said, how am I supposed to even think about all this data? I don't even know how to deal with it. So we developed a mapping tool, which is the Atlas, Minnesota Atlas, that summarizes everything from natural resource data, environmental data, infrastructure data, demographic data, over 500 databases in the state of Minnesota, so you can put it on a map without GIS training and start to understand the complexity of the challenges we have every day. We have a daily user level of 150 to 180 communities around the state. And finally, the forecast tool, which is really a tool to help foresters and our forest-based industries understand, if I make a choice in harvest scenarios, what impact does climate change have on that? What impact do I have to be thinking about for habitat, recreation, water, et cetera? So the foresters here in the state are already using this, and it's still a beta test. So we're delivering. Thank you for your investment, and I'm very happy to answer any questions. But before I do, I will extend an open invitation. It's your institute. You created it. You're always welcome to come visit and see what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Yes, I've been there. I'm not sure how many others on the committee have been there. I'm not seeing anybody else. Of course, I'm the crazy one that travels all over the state looking at everything, so I have been there. It's also just north of my husband's home, so there we go. So my question is a higher level one, just really quickly. What is the NRRI annual budget? Because, you know, I see that we have you in the reoccurring understate specials, and then I know that we had the $4 million one-time appropriations, but what's the total annual budget?
I'm happy to say that we're, oops, sorry. Thank you. I'm happy to say that we've been growing. This last year, we came just shy of 25 million. A lot of that is due to the fact that we're bringing in some significant federal grants from the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and the U.S. Forest Service and EPA to be investing in some of these projects we're driving. That's, I think, a result of how we've been investing and how we've been evolving our portfolio of research.
Great, thank you. Representative Cleaborn.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So you just mentioned the federal grants. Are you concerned about any of the cuts that we're hearing to the Department of Defense and how that might impact your work?
Director
Or any of the other grants that might be, quote, paused?
Director Weberg.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, of course, I'm concerned. I think I'd be a liar if I said I was not worried at all, but I feel that we're in a very strong position with the kinds of work we're doing and the way we're approaching it. The work we're doing is really focused on competitive industry, developing and using energy efficiently and effectively and needing more of it. How do we get more of it? And quite frankly, when you look at the industries we're talking about, it also has a national security implication as well, because as we think about sourcing iron, if you don't have a vertically integrated steel industry in the country, that's a bad thing. And if we don't utilize Minnesota iron, it'll be coming from Brazil and Eastern Canada. So there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of states in competition with Minnesota to go and do this. So I think when you look at the alignment with the mission of the government, whether it's the former or the one we have today, it speaks well to those goals.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I just have a question. I think Ms. Tonneson has to come back up for just a quick second, just so I am absolutely sure that we are on the same page. Is NRRI part of the system special on line 226? You have it
Madam
under state
Chair.
specials, but there's should be another subcategory under state specials. Is it part of the system special?
Madam Chair, it is part of the system special.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that I'm on the right line.
You are.
Okay, so members, the base appropriation is in line 226. It's under the subcategory of state special appropriations, and this is the system special. So NRRI is a part of the system special from line 226 on page 7. Is everybody there? Okay, perfect. Because we did do a one-time appropriation of $4 million, which they did talk about, but they also talked about kind of their base funding, which is found in that line. Okay, any questions? Oh, yes, we have Representative Allen has a question.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. It's refreshing to hear about getting patents and doing something along those lines. It's something that we've seen within over in the agriculture department or agriculture side of it for years, where it helps buffer against unpredictability within the market and gives you an opportunity to be able to have a little bit of income coming back in order to manage in those lean times, like when we're dealing with a budgetary shortfall here in the state of Minnesota. I was just, you may not have the numbers with you today. I really appreciate your testimony about what you were addressing. I was just kind of wondering if you could get to me sometime kind of the income that you guys are seeing off, or what you're expecting to see for income off of those 2 patented items or any others, just to scratch my own curiosity. So thank you for that.
Director Weber.
Yes, thanks, Chair Rarick. We're on the upswing for the InnovaTree right now. Right now, people want to order millions of them, and we're in the hundreds of thousands. So it's oncoming. The other patent I mentioned, that is now that's under conversation right now. So I'm expecting it'll be significant, but I can't really talk about it further than that. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, good. We'll continue with the presentation. Thank you. Thanks for telling us about NRRI.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm happy to hear you have a hard time saying it too.
It's too many R's or something.
Thank you, Rolf. And finally, I wanted to touch on another state special, which is on this slide here. This comes through my office, the Research and Innovation Office, but it's for the whole entire university. This program is called Grant in Aid Program. It provides grants to support research and creative work of faculty and graduate students across the whole system. And you can see on this slide that this is not a new program at the U. It was started in 1919 for medical research, and in 1941, it was broadened to the general faculty research. And there are several different categories under which faculties compete for these funds. I'll just touch upon the few of them.
And Vice President, 1 second. I'm going to have, and she knows what I'm going to ask. Is this part of the O&M, or is this one of the state specials?
Madam Chair, this is $703,000 on the bottom of the slide is the state special. It's within the system special.
Okay.
And there, it is supplemented, because you can see the total on the bottom at 2.5 million with other sources of income, but the 703 is in the system special.
Okay, thank you. So members, again, that's the same line 226 that NRRI is a part of. Under the state special appropriations, this is part of the systems special, and that's a total appropriation of 18.3 million in the previous biennium. So this is a portion of that 18.3 million. Okay, now that we are literally all on the same page, please continue.
Yep, so thank you, Madam Chair. So there are different flavors of this funding. Bridge funding, which is helping our faculty to tackle very high potential projects when they have a gap in their funding. For example, if funding is delayed or there's a transition from one phase to the another phase, this type of bridge funding ensures that these projects continue without the break. We also provide some funding for our new assistant professors as they join the university, because we know this very competitive landscape and they need some seed funding in order to generate some data which makes them competitive at the national level. And also this funding provides some resources for creative new ideas for which it will be very hard to compete nationally, because these are new directions in which faculty is moving, and it will be hard for peer reviewers to provide support for them unless they see more data and more depth. So this program helps to create that. We have awarded about $11.8 million over the last 5 years under this program. And as you can see, as VP Tonneson pointed out, we leverage the state spatial amount with many other dollars, including our own endowment money. And we see a very significant return on these awards, leveraging about $11.4 for every dollar we invest. This is a very good investment. We feel the return on this is very, very high. So I'll move to my last slide here, which is our biennium request for the research and innovation. And Madam Chair and members of the committee, this is a new request. We are seeking to drive Minnesota's economy to address some of our greatest challenges that we see. We would like to partner with you, as we did in our MinDrive areas, to make a commitment in 4 distinct areas that combine strengths of our Minnesota's businesses and industry with the University of Minnesota's research strength. These 4 areas are biomanufacturing, precision agriculture, green energy and green iron at NRI, and hypersonics. We feel that these 4 areas not only overlap with our industry and our state's interest, but also are very, very important for our national security and for our nation. That pretty much concludes my portion of this presentation. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you, Vice President Priya. Any questions before we move on? Okay, seeing none.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
And as they're coming up, members, this looks like this is the Ag and Extension State Special. So this would be line 223 on your spreadsheet, page 7. The Ag and Extensions Special under State Special Appropriations. So again, that's line 223. And that is a very large appropriation, so we should pay attention to this. The amount of appropriation from Chapter 41 was $85.5 million. So this is the largest of all, so 85 of 193, that's a lot. So this is a big portion of the 193 million. So, okay, so now we're all on the same page. Please introduce yourself to the committee and continue with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Rarick. I'm Brian Boer. I'm Dean of the College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resource Sciences at the University of Minnesota, and also Director of the Minnesota Agricultural Experiment Station. Dean Durgan is joining me here today, and she'll speak immediately after I'm completed. Thank you for inviting us today. As Chair Rarick said, this is a large appropriation, and people have talked about why their appropriations came about. Our appropriation actually precedes the University of Minnesota, or is part of the University of Minnesota from its founding. We are the land-grant university. As part of the land-grant university, the initial investment in that was from the federal government from land sales with the Land-Grant Act, or the Morrill Act. And as part of that, there's a matching or a investment with states of those funds and funds to support agricultural and natural resources, research and education at the land-grant universities. So this goes back to some of the founding aspects of the university as part of its allocation and that support. And as you look at, I'll go to this next slide. As you look at this slide, you'll see the distribution of this funding for the state special portion of it, the $42.9 million. CFANS, which I'm the dean of that college, has about 21.8 of that, or 50% of that funding comes to that college. It goes, extension is the second large part of that investment. Those are that core part of the land-grant agricultural research universities, at their founding and support with the states. Beyond that, you see several other colleges, Vet Med, Veterinary Medicine, College of Education and Development, CHD, Design, which is College of Design, the Agricultural Experiment Station, which is a federal portion of this I'll talk about in a bit, that comes into that, and then the College of Biological Sciences, which is CBS. Those entities get a share of that funding along with some federal funds to do their work as well. College of Education and Human Development, for example, does licensure for teaching and agricultural teaching, and they formerly did education around extension programming, which is part of that education as well. College of Design, when you think about textiles, is an agricultural product. That's the historical link to the design college. Vet Med, of course, is our partner in animal health and creating the next generation of veterinarians, as well as research in animal disease and health. And then College of Biological Sciences, again, one of the core foundations of our work is with biology, which we also have faculty of there. So that's the distribution of those funds within the University of Minnesota to the various colleges that are part of that programs. This is within, more specifically, the College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resource Sciences. And you'll see the state special and federal allocations on that as well. Again, that partnership that's there. There are larger federal allocations that aren't shown here that go to the Ag Experiment Station, and I have that note about that federal appropriation that is there. That's linked to the Farm Bill that typically comes through, and the Hatch Act is part of that to fund that. The rest of the slides on that are basically income generation, or operations and research, the O&M dollars are the portion of state funding that come through the O&M budget. The remainder of those are income generation. We are the educational, CFANS is the educational unit within the university that does agricultural and natural resource undergraduate and graduate degree programs. That's the tuition and fees. Sales and other revenue, I'll mention a little bit later. We operate across the state of Minnesota. We have 10 research and outreach centers across the state. Part of that is due to the fact, of course, Minnesota is quite diverse in its soils and climate and cropping systems across the state, as well as animal systems. And so those sales and revenue, as we operate those enterprises, for example, we do have sales of crops and animals and so on that come through that. We also sell other products through our production systems, milk, dairy, and so on, that are part of that income. Gifts, of course, are part of our donor base, our alumni and friends that support our work. ICR is indirect cost recovery. That's the cost recovery that comes from grants and contracts through typically federal funds that come in as we write grants to support that work. For context, there was a question earlier about the impacts of some of the federal funding, and certainly as we look at that, changes in ICR, for example, does have an impact on those revenues that will come in through those programs.
We have a question from Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dean Burr and colleagues, for being here. When you were talking about the tuition and fees, it just reminded me of a question I've had the last couple days that I just haven't gotten out there yet. So there is a serious projected shortfall in the state grant program. So how is that impacting your tuition and fees? And, where does, I know you're here about the used budget, but we also have to deal with that. So how does that impact the used budget when we have such a large shortfall in the state grant program?
Dean Burr.
Mayor Chair Rourke, Representative Robbins. It does impact those programs because those grants are key to student enrollments and fees. I don't manage, the University of Minnesota manages our tuition policies, for example. But of course, as those numbers of students decline, if they don't have those grants, of course, that affects our revenue. Obviously, to address that, typically you look towards other sources of revenue, such as tuition increases or other ways to do that, or trying to seek out other grants and support students through that. But certainly those grants are critical, I know, for our students, in particular our under-resourced students who are coming to the University of Minnesota.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that. And that's my concern too. So I had read, and this may not be accurate, but I had read that you was looking at a 4.5 tuition increase and for next year. And if that's really where we're headed, and then there's also a shortfall in the state grant program, I feel like we're really making it so challenging for students. So I wondered if you could just speak to that and what other ways we could maybe try to address that. Because to me, that enrollment number, we're finally seeing a turnaround, and I feel like that could really be a hardship. Thank you.
Dean Burr, or if someone behind you wanted to take that, that's fine too. Ms. Tonneson, you're up again. Good thing you're here today, Ms. Tonneson. It's been helpful.
Certainly. Madam Chair, Representative Robbins, I sometimes feel like we've created a very complicated financial aid environment for our students and families, much like the tax system, for example. It's really hard to determine the outcomes for an individual. But there are a number of overlapping and kind of coordinated issues that you have to think through when these things come together. So if the state grant awards drop, we have to understand what is the impact on the North Star Promise program and which students would then benefit differently from the North Star Promise program. And then, of course, what's happening at the federal level. If the Pell Grants drop, it is the same thing. But each level of student income, the income of the families, determines their eligibility for all of these different aid programs. So depending on where you sit, you may see a decrease, you may see flat, depending on the policies that are enacted. The university also has need-based financial aid programs, and we will have to make some determinations if we want to divert funding to adjust those if the other forms of aid drop, or do we see the reduction in enrollment that you were just discussing. There is no automatic impact on the university's budget when the financial aid awards change. It's impacted by whether or not the enrollment is increased or decreased as a result of those changes. So if we're able to maintain enrollment, there wouldn't be no impact on the university's revenue from these changes. But if enrollment drops, our revenue would drop. Does that help?
Okay. Dean Burr, you are back up.
Thank you, Chair Roderick. So proceeding with this, those are excellent questions. I guess I'll just comment as a person who sort of represents the land-grant university as Dean Durgan, that core piece, that aspect of access to public higher education is really critical to our values, of course. So thank you for the question. So to continue on with this, I'll go simply, this is the history, for example, the state special that comes to CFANs as part of our programs. You'll notice in that this is back to FY10. There was some small reductions then, but through time it's been constant. And just added in here that, of course, costs increase through time with inflation and so on. So the purchasing power is the way to look at that going backwards would have been essentially $72 million back in 2010. That rises to 110 if you go back to the turn of the century. And today that 30, of course, the 37 million is what's there. So that's just the trend line and the support that's there. And particularly as this supports our research enterprise and our extension enterprises and so on, of course, that has impacts on our abilities to deliver those. And we do look towards additional revenue sources to do that work. One item I haven't mentioned yet, which is not included in this that I want to bring that is part of a state special, so a bit of a segue here, is the Bell Museum of Natural History. The Bell Museum of Natural History is operated by CFANs within our portfolio at the University of Minnesota. It is, again, one of these, I think it was 1872, if I get that right, was this establishment of the Bell Museum of Natural History, and it was established as the State Museum of Natural History. So again, there's this connection with some of these funds back to the original foundations of the university and the goal of the state to look at agricultural and natural resources as Minnesota, one of our key elements of our state's development, growth, and success as a state. So we operate that. There's $140,000, just for context, that's $140,000 appropriation within this that goes to the Bell Museum as part of that for that state special. In terms of impacts, just very briefly in this, the questions have been asked regarding leveraging funds. We average around $75 to $80 million a year in sponsored research projects, similar to other presenters have said. And this capacity, we call the state special when we talked about this, because we have it at the federal level too, we call it capacity funding. And for CFANs in particular, our enterprise is quite large. When I mentioned we have 10 research and outreach centers, those can include livestock facilities, they include cropping equipment, they include land base on campus, in the St. Paul campus, which I'd welcome you to come to, and our 10 research and outreach centers across the state. If you want to come to a mini CFANs, go to any one of our 10 research and outreach centers. But those enterprises, to be able to operate those year to year, that base capacity funding from the state special is critical to doing that, because we are not, as we're doing research, and we do research to help farmers not fail, so we fail for them. And one of the challenges there is that, of course, as we're failing, we're not exactly profitable in those enterprises. We're not doing the highest yielding products. We're not putting on, the amounts of fertilizer to challenge and see how crops perform without that. And so that state special really enables us to do that through time and throughout the years. But we do get a significant return. And another question that's come up is patents. And one of the things we do is we do patent. There's a crop varietal protection or patent act at the federal level that we can patent crop varieties that we develop. And so, for example, I typically say that our agriculture returns are incalculable. Because if you think about wheat rust, for example, in northwest Minnesota, and right now with some of the reductions from we've seen with staffing around USDA grants, we do pathogen detection, disease detection early on in the season, so we could help crop protection companies identify what types of fungicides they should be delivering to farmers. The farmers trying to develop what types of varieties they should be planting to resist those pathogens. We see them coming up from the Gulf as the season goes. And so we've developed those varieties of resistant to those pathogens. We've often helped create the fungicides for those. That recurs year after year in millions of dollars of crops across Minnesota. So that's not included, this is simply the returns from our direct grants. But beyond that, those returns that are annuities essentially to our work. So when you scale the scale of the state special, that is certainly, the millions and billions of dollars that come through Minnesota in agriculture. We return back to those each and every year. I'll also just mention that, I guess I'll go to the next slide so I can move through this because I want to have to give our other partners a chance to speak here. I mentioned the teaching aspect of this, of CFANS and the state special, of course, bringing young people and that talent we need into agriculture. So we're talking about technology innovation and new methods. We typically have we have 1,700 to 1,800 undergraduate students in CFANS. We have another 600 graduate students, roughly speaking. Those students are the students going out and doing research in our enterprises and helping to develop those new products. We do have a large staff base because as we're operating and running those enterprises, it takes quite a few people to do that work. And last year we graduated 505 students into agriculture and food systems across the state. So not only delivering on the research, but assuring that next generation of professionals are out there in the state. And as I often talk about that, the University of Minnesota is a premier land-grant university, and I always include our partners in biological science and engineering. Our students come out with exemplary education, which you'll find across Minnesota as the leaders of Minnesota's agriculture are often University of Minnesota alums. So with that, I will turn it over to Dean Durgan, but first Chair Rarick. That concludes my portion of this.
Thank you. I don't see any questions at this time, so we'll just continue on. Please introduce yourself to the committee and continue with your presentation.
Madam Chair, Committee, it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm Bev Durgan, Dean of University of Minnesota Extension. University of Minnesota Extension is part of the land-grant mission of the university. It was established in 1909, so this has been a long-established funding from the state to Extension. Extension delivers our programs through an integrated system of county, state, and research and outreach center offices. As you can see from the map, we are located throughout the state of Minnesota, and approximately 65 to 70% of all of our faculty, staff and support staff live in greater Minnesota, so outstate. This is the budget of Extension. So as you can see, the funding that we receive from the state of Minnesota is about 38% of our budget. We also receive funding for from our county partners from our county. Our federal appropriation is similar to what Dean Burr talked about, is a federal appropriation. It's called the Smith-Lever Act. And then our final appropriation is through grants, gifts, and income for our programs. So the state special funding, the funding that we receive from the state special and also from the University of Minnesota, you can see is the O&M appropriation and the state special appropriation. So they're about 50% both from O&M and from the state special. And then I'm sorry this slide is a little bit wonky here, but just again, the question that you had about where do we spend our money, Extension is very people-oriented. Our programs are delivered by people. So if you are faculty, our staff located throughout the state, also located on campus, so you can see our salary and fringe is the majority of where we spend our money. We also have program support, so this support is supporting those programs, and as a statewide organization, we do a lot of travel in this state. So we're moving through the state, going to the communities and supporting our programs. Then we have overall operations, we do not own offices or buildings, but we do lease those throughout the state. So that is an operational cost that we have. And then just to talk a little bit about the impact of Extension's programs. Dean Burr talked about we are part of that state special. We're also part of federal funding. And so we work very closely with our partner colleges, whether it's CFANS, the College of Veterinary Medicine, also with design and serving the state. And what the state special really allows us to do is to really work on some of those big issues throughout the state. We all know about the concern around nitrogen and the use of nitrogen nitrogen in the state, and that is a big program for us. And also, the state special allows us to be able to develop programs around some of these other big issues like avian influenza and the impact that has on our growers. And then finally, just one other impact that I'd like to talk about, next slide, is our work with Minnesota youth. All of our counties and all of our county offices invest in our 4-H program, our youth development program. It's a very important program throughout the state. Currently, we have over 50,000 youth involved in 4-H clubs throughout the state and more youth involved in our youth development programs. So we're proud of that. It's increasing. And just as one thing that we do want to say is that one of the outcomes of 4-H is a large percent of our 4-Hers really learn about careers, what they want to do with their lives, and a large percent of them go on to post-secondary education, whether it's in our Minnesota state system or our other university systems. So with that, I will just end that. Again, if you want to know more about Extension, look at our website. Extension's website is one of the #1 websites of extension systems in the U.S. for the number of people that use it.
Thank you. We are just slightly over time, but we're going to go about 5 more minutes because I know there's a couple quick questions before we leave because this is a big portion of the money outside of O&M. So Representative Allen has a question, and if you all have a quick question, we'll go about 5 more minutes. Representative Allen.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. I had 2 real quick questions for you. They're maybe not simple, maybe easy, I don't know. I was just kind of wondering, could you provide the information as far as the number of administrative and upper management positions you have at the University of Minnesota in CFANS relative to the number of researchers, specifically how that ratio of administrators to research faculty has changed over the, let's say, the last 5 years to a decade?
And Dean Durgan, if you would like to bring that information back, we can certainly do that too. I don't know if you were prepared for that answer, or does Ms. Tonneson have?
Yeah.
Does somebody have an answer? Because we could take the answer if you know, otherwise we'll take it when.
Yeah, I'll take that question back.
Okay, Dean Burr.
We'll get, Chair Ark, thank you. We'll get that information back through time with that. We have seen, due to the funding elements coming through, we do have fewer faculty today than we did have, say, 5 and 10 years ago.
Representative Allen.
Thank you again for that, Madam Chair. Another question I asked previously when the University of Minnesota was here is over at the Rosemount site, back at Umore Park there in 2016, you had about 4,772 acres. There's been about 4 major land sales since that point in time that at least I can find in the public, selling over 900 or close to about 1,000 acres worth of ground for a total of $74 million. I was told that those dollars were earmarked specifically for CFANS or for the agriculture department. Is there any way to be able to see exactly how much of those dollars have been earmarked and if any of those dollars will be going over to the farm project down in Austin? And thank you for the questions.
Dean Burr.
Sure, Eric. There is some of those funds going to the farm project in Austin that would be associated with that. There's been some from that have already helped to support that. There are broader funds that are yet to be determined, and we can get back.
Great, they will get back to us. Okay, so last question, and then we do have to get to caucus and floor. Representative Schwartz.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So according to a salary budget list that we have for 2024, it looks like for the DEI administration, it looks like you guys have 93 full-time employees and their salaries equivalent to $7.9 million. Is that correct? Can you confirm that for me?
Dean Burr, or if someone else has that information, it's more of a global question, or if you would like to get back to us.
That would be, yeah, that would be a university level question, I think.
Okay.
We'll have to get back. We don't have that with us today, so we'll have to bring that back.
All right, so they're going to get back to us on that. Thanks for the
I
questions.
have a few more follow-up questions, but I guess I could wait since we're over time.
We're out of time. I'm going to let the Democrats, our Democrat colleagues have one last question, and if we need to, we can have them back for a 15, 20-minute kind of follow-up too. They did offer that before we started. Representative Cleaborn, last word.
Really short question. I'm always interested in knowing how crops develop over time and how we are best serving our farmers in greater Minnesota. People are always surprised that a suburban legislator asks this question, but if you could just kind of tell me how the state specials have helped develop new crops and new varieties for our farmers in our state. Thank you.
Chair Rarick, Representative Claiborne, thank you. There's actually a long-term process. We develop crops across the system, from agricultural crops to horticultural crops, for example. This is my plug for the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, actually. If you've had the Honeycrisp apple or Kudo apple, that's part of that development process. And basically, those take about 30 years on average for new crops to be developed. And so the state special is a core foundation to us to be able to sustain and support that work. So recently, an exciting one was if you saw Delta Airlines and their flight with sustainable aviation fuel. That was a camelina crop that was developed at the University of Minnesota through several years, decades. So it's definitely a key part of that foundational support to be able to continue that sort of development work.
Thank you, Representative Claiborne. Okay, thank you, everybody, for a very robust conversation, and thank you for for being here for the third day, and we are adjourned.